Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of Hustle Nation Podcast. Today, we've got a real treat. Steve Jones is in the house. Steve is a professional leadership coach, keynote speaker, best-selling author who teaches leaders to empower themselves and others and create cultures of strength, unity, and resiliency. Steve's positive impact developed as a teacher and head coach at Kimberly High School, where throughout 11 seasons, he led his team to a record of 129-9. That's right. 129-9, including 70 consecutive victories, 5 state championships. Steve's winning formula is now captivating Fortune 500 companies, professional sports organizations, and competitive leaders looking to inspire successful teams. Steve is the co-founder of Jaden Jones Coaching and Consulting, focusing on leadership, culture, and mindset. He has been commissioned by numerous leading organizations, including the Green Bay Packers, Verizon, Kimberly-Clark, Stryker Medical. Steve is the co-author of best-selling book, The Twin Thieves, and currently is a culture coach at Mutual Omaha Mortgage and facilitator at the Center of Exceptional Leadership at St. Norbert College. Steve, welcome to the show.
I'm grateful to be here with you guys today.
A lot of this is like, where do we start? But my first question is, where did this coaching journey begin for you? Did you always know you wanted to be a high school football coach?
I don't know if always is the right answer, but from a young age, and it goes back to my childhood. I grew up with a father who was an alcoholic, abusive alcoholic. And luckily, I had a 5th grade teacher named Mr. Stoskoff. That's not just a killer name, Mr. Stoskoff. Even though he taught 5th grade, he was the head hockey coach at our high school. And hockey was really popular. So he was young. I mean, he was single. He had a boat. He had a dog. Like, to me, he was it, right?
He's a rock star.
And he really went out of his way to make a difference in my life. And I don't need to go into the whole story, but there was one particular day where it was like, man, I want to be like that guy. I want to make a difference like that guy. And so I actually started as an elementary school teacher, and I got into coaching because I wanted to make a difference like Mr. Stoskoff made a difference to me. So at a young age, I would say 5th grade, I was like, you know what? Eventually, I want to be like that guy. I want to be a difference maker like that guy. So that's kind of why I took the path that I did. Obviously, there's a lot of other people that made impacts along the way, but that would be my kind of first memory of saying, yep, I want to be a coach and a teacher and make a difference like Mr. Stoskoff did for me.
That's incredible. That's usually where a lot of these stories start, is because someone who was very successful had someone who cared about them that maybe wasn't a parent. Interestingly enough, you coached for 10 years, and based on your record, it looks like you had immediate success. Did you know what you wanted to build and what you wanted to do when you started coaching high school football?
Yeah, well, I don't know about immediate success. I guess it's all about how you define that, right? But, you know, I was an assistant coach at Kimberly before I took over, and we were successful before I took over as the head coach. So it wasn't like I was trying to build from the ground up. But with that, that's equally to me is what I'm proud of, is the fact that we were able to continue to grow success. As you've heard before, it's a lot easier to get to the top than it is to stay there. So when I took over, you know, I was blessed with a great coaching staff, great kids, a great community. You know, the old saying too, that it takes a village. It literally does. Kimberly is a village, but it takes a village full of people. So I was lucky to be a part of that. And we found ways to continue to grow that greatness that was established. And really where we focused on was leadership development. And I think that's what kind of took us to the next level then, is developing leaders within our program, because we all know that the best teams are player-led. I would say the best businesses are employee-led. And I think that leadership development program in our football program helped elevate us even more and allowed us to have some of the successes that you mentioned earlier, the 70-game win streak, the 5 straight state championships. That was because those teams were truly player-led. So that was the vision of how do we take a program that's already really good and established, and how do we make it even better? And we did that through leadership, obviously a number of other things, but that was, I think, a key area that helped us continue to grow that greatness that was already established.
Steve, when you look at, so many high school teams, there's so many teams that are not, they're certainly not talking about leadership development, right? It's X's and O's and here's our strategy and things like that. As you came in and started to focus more on leadership development, I'm curious, what was the response initially, right? Because that's certainly thinking outside the box relative to the way most programs are run. What was that response initially? Because to your point, there was success prior, but to stay on top is a real issue. And, there's that risk when people have success. Well, let's just keep doing what we're doing. We're already successful. Why are we focusing on this now? Let's just focus on what we have been.
Yeah, well, a couple ththings to that great question. First, how was it taken in, the idea of leadership development? Because it was new. We established something called a leadership council, which were kids that wanted to continue to grow as leaders, and we would teach them because a big thing about leadership, it's a skill, and just like any other skill, it needs to be taught, it needs to be trained. People need practice and feedback along the way, just like playing the piano, learning how to play guitar, shoot a free throw. It takes practice. And I never wanted to be the coach or the leader that said, hey, our leadership isn't very good, or we need more leaders. And I just kind of turn my back and I hope it happens. So when we started introducing this, I'm a firm believer in the 10-80-10 principle. So in life, there's about 10% of people that are going to love your ideas. They're going to go along with you. You're going to have about 80% that are indifferent, and you're going to have 10% that aren't going to like your ideas, that aren't going to like you for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they just don't like themselves and they need to project that out on other people. But you're always going to have the naysayers, right? And so we kind of had that. We had some people that were on board right away. We had a bunch of people that didn't really know what I was talking about or what this would look like. And it was my job to get them to, quote unquote, buy in or trust that this is going to be a great thing for them individually, and then for us collectively. And then, you're always going to have the naysayers. And the question is, in that journey, are you going to allow the energy vampires, the negaholics, the people that are addicted to negativity, are you going to allow that bottom 10% to kind of dictate your decisions in your journey? So the biggest thing was to focus on the majority, the 80%, and get those people to buy in. And we did that, I think, through inviting and educating the influential leaders within our organization. They weren't always the best leaders. They weren't always the best players. They weren't always the most talented. But if you can reach the impactful people in your organization and get them to buy in, it helps bring other people with you. So, and I think the other part of your question too, Dustin, is just, we talk about always having a white belt mindset. And it comes from a quick story. There was a person named Jericho Cotto that very young, was growing up, was small, and got bullied a lot. So he got into jiu-jitsu, and he really learned that craft. And then what he ended up doing is he started to wanted to expand jiu-jitsu with different holds and throws, and it wasn't within the framework of that. So he started his own sport called judo. And as you know, judo is an Olympic sport today. So judo started to catch on. So everything we know about the scoring system and the holds and the throws comes back to Cotto. And he was out spreading this and spreading the word of judo, and they were taking ships, and he ended up getting very ill, and everybody knew that he was going to pass, unfortunately. So he was on his deathbed, and all of his disciples and the people around him said, if you could have one wish, what would it be? And he said, I want to be buried in my white belt. Now, everybody was a little shocked because the guy deserved like 15 black belts to be buried in, but he wanted to be buried in his white belt. So they asked why. He said, I entered this world with a learner's mindset. In every situation I went to in my life, I came in as a learner. And my next stage in my journey, I want to enter that stage as a learner. So please bury me in my white belt. So we encourage high performers to continue to have a white belt mindset, continue to develop a black belt skill set, but always have a white belt mindset. So one thing that also helped us in our journey throughout our program is there was a lot of people within our program, coaches, our strength coaches, everybody that always had a white belt mindset. What can we continue to do to get better? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people that say, well, this is the way we've always done it. That was one thing that we never said. We were continuing to develop. We had our core values and our core systems, but we were always looking for ways to get better, even in the midst of our 70-game win streak.
That's awesome.
That's excellent.
I love that story.
So one kind of follow up to that, as we look at, one of the things that kind of popped out to me when I was reading your book was relative to the work ethic that it takes. So one of the things we talk a lot about in Hustle is, everybody kind of wants the dream. Everybody wants the result. But so many people are hesitant or just don't know what it actually takes to have that success. And I think about, with your team and, also with your coaching, right? You're going into organizations that are in lots of different phases, and you had kids in lots of different phases. How did you kind of lay out the framework for them to, this is what it takes to win a championship. This is the behaviors it takes to win a championship. And are you in or are you out?
Yeah, I mean, that was a daily kind of message, right? Because it can't just be a one-time thing, at the beginning of the year kickoff in your company or whatever, but it has to be continued because ultimately it takes what it takes, right? So if I was going to hold an apple or a bag of Doritos up and say, which one is better for you? It's a simple answer, right? But when it comes down to the decision, are you willing to make the right decision time in and time out, right? Really simple, example. So it really does when it comes down to, I think there's a lot of people that want to be great, but I don't know if there's a lot of people that are willing to do what it takes to be great day in and day out, make those decisions, be disciplined enough. So I was just out at Washington State University and I was meeting with the head coach. We were having dinner and I said to him, there's a lot of people that think that they can do what you're doing right now, but how many people are willing to do what it took to get to where you are? I mean, the guy was moving his family everywhere. I mean, late night, like his journey is incredible. So, a lot of people don't reverse engineer it and say, okay, well, what does it take to get to that spot? And am I willing to do that time after time? So I first heard that from a guy named Ben Foskey, and it was John Maxwell that said, there's a lot of people that think they can do what I do, but not a lot of people are willing to do what it took to get here. So I think about that quite a bit is what is the process? What is the day-to-day behaviors that end up making you great? Because as you guys know, it's kind of like an iceberg. You see the success, that's the 10%, but it's the 90% underneath the water that really is the difference maker.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Steve, you say culture either happens by design or default. And I want to take this back to when you started coaching and when you decided you wanted to implement leadership into the football program. You obviously designed that. And I'm curious how that evolved over time. Like, at what point did you decide we're not just going to teach leadership, we're going to teach servant leadership? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think you guys have probably heard the quote that every culture is perfectly designed to get the results that you're getting, right? And when you talk about our program, why, when I was there, it was that our players left better people. That was it, and we didn't talk about wins and losses. We talked about what it took to be a champion, what it took to be successful, because ultimately championships and winning games is an outcome, and we ultimately can't control that. We can influence it by our day-to-day actions. So if our why was that they lead better people, how our program evolved as far as leadership is, I'll be honest with you, at first it was, okay, how is this going to help us on the field, right? How are we going to have better leaders on the field? And then it transformed into, how do we just get better people, better leaders in our community? Because the real gauge of our success, I believe, is how do our young men turn out 15, 20, 30 years from now? What kind of fathers are they? What kind of husbands are they? What kind of community members are they? What kind of leaders are they in their organizations? So that ended up being, kind of the ultimate goal. And we did things like hosting a camp for kids with special needs. And it was free, and kids from all over the state really would come. And the camp really didn't have anything to do with football. You're taking a ball and trying to throw it into a garbage can. You're diving into a pit. You're choreographing touchdown celebrations. But when that student or that young person with special needs would show up, there would be a high school player waiting for them. And for the next 90 minutes, they would build a connection. And you talk about goosebump moments as a coach. You talk about misty-eyed moments as a person, as watching these young men interact with those kids with special needs. Because I feel like we are the best version of ourselves when we're serving other people. And I would see it firsthand. So what's really interesting too is, at the end of the season or even in the spring, we'd host a dinner just for our seniors. And it was just a celebration, a thank you. And one question I'd pose and every senior would share was, what's the best memory in your career? It was amazing how many kids talked about that special needs camp. I mean, kids that never lost a game in their high school career, that held up 3 or 4 state championships, championship trophies, talked about that camp. So that ended up being more of the transition as we evolved in our leadership program, Chris.
I'm not surprised by that at all either.
So one other question, Steve, from an accountability perspective, right? So people are bought into here are the behaviors, the daily reminder of this is what it takes to be a champion. This is what it takes to be a leader. I'm sure there were times where they weren't following those behaviors, right? And there are individuals that, for whatever reason, weren't able to do that. From an accountability perspective, I think a lot of times there's this misnomer of accountability has to be heavy-handed and has to be taken the wrong way. But the best accountability is when it's done for much deeper reasons and people are bought into it. So can you talk a little bit about just how you created a culture of accountability as well?
Yeah, because one of our foundations in our program was love. So a value of ours that carried year after year was family. Forget about me, I love you. That's what family would stand for. Forget about me, I love you. And so when you hear love and you hear family and you hear these things, you think it's soft and it's warm and fuzzy and not a whole lot of accountability. We had a high degree of accountability and discipline in our program because I think discipline and accountability is love, right? So let me throw it back to you, Dustin. If I would ask you this question, who's the best leader in your life? Like someone that you've past or present that you've had, like who pops in your head and why?
Likely my dad.
Okay.
My dad was always a tremendous role model for me. Taught me a lot about what it took to be a champion, the sacrifice it took in a lot of different ways, not just in business, but as a father, husband, community leader, and all of those things. And certainly he was a lot of what you just said, right? It was other people first. He was his best version, serving other people, and still is today.
So let me ask you another question. Did you always like your dad, like in moments throughout your life? Did you always like him?
No.
Okay.
No.
Why? Think back to your teenage years. Why were there moments maybe you're sitting in the room not really liking your dad in that moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly sometimes it was because he was calling me out, right? I mean, he was totally unafraid of letting me know exactly where it was, and in other cases, as a young kid, you're asking for the answer, and sometimes the worst thing someone can do is give you the answer.
For sure,
right? So one small story I have is actually it had to do with some of the stuff with Hustle. Was I was 17 years old. He was very successful, and I'm thinking about college and my future and things like that. And I asked him, what does it take to be successful? And he was in doing his work, so he kind of pulls down what he was reading and looks over at me. And he's like, "Oh, that's easy, hard work." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a BS answer. Like, give me I want to know what it actually takes." And he of course just smiles and grins, right? And he's like, "Look, at the end of the day, it's hard work. Like, yes, there's more to it, but at the core, there's so many people that are unwilling to put in the work. You've already seen it in your life. You're 17 years on this earth. You're going to see it for the rest of your life. That at the core, there's lots of things that'll make you successful. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to put in the work, and if you're not going to get there, and if you're willing to put in the work, you're already probably in the few percent that are willing to really put that sacrifice in."
Yeah, I appreciate.
But he didn't give me the answer. He didn't give me the answer I wanted.
The reason I guess I asked that question is there's no doubt that he loved you, but I would bet that there was a high degree of accountability. And,
For sure.
I look at leadership and parenting, like great parenting and great leadership. There's a lot of common threads in between that. So we taught that through our program, and that when you're held accountable, that means we care about you. We love you, because what's the other option? When you're not doing what you're supposed to do, what's the other option? Well, nobody says anything. What does that mean, right? So what would you rather have? And then we would also teach that our best leaders were the hardest on. And how they respond to that accountability and that discipline will spread and permeate throughout our culture. So we would really be intentional about training our best leaders to receive feedback, receive accountability and discipline in a great way, in a great response, because other people are watching. if they get held accountable or there's discipline installed and they drop their head or they say things underneath their breath or they have poor body language, that gives permission for everybody else to do the same. So going back to the player-led teams, you need to train people that feedback is positive. Accountability is a great thing. That's how you learn and you grow. And how you receive that is really, really important.
That's awesome. Steve, so I got to ask you, I was in the car this morning and Trent Dilfer was on talking about the challenges of coaching. And one of the things that he brought up, which I thought was convenient given our conversation today, was coaching players, coaching coaches. And then another narrative came up, which is probably a topic for another day, which is coaching parents. When we all know that, especially at the high school level, that's a part of the game. But I would love to hear about some of the challenges and maybe even the way you approach coaching coaches versus coaching players.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, Chris. I'm probably not dropping any big knowledge bombs here, but the coaching the kids is the easy part. Kids are the best part of coaching. It's the adults that mess things up. Right? And I'm not just talking coaches; I'm talking parents and everybody else, right? So it is a challenge, right? And especially maybe some of those people that tend to fall in that bottom 10%, right? And how do you coach them? How do you continue to try to guide them, try to get them to trust and buy into what you're trying to do within your program? And then obviously there's moments and times where if it's not a great fit for both of you, then you have to unfortunately move on. And I never wanted to do that. And both with kids and coaches, I would say, looking back in my career, that was some things where maybe I held on to people a little too long because I wanted them to stay a part of it because I thought our program was so good for people that some of those people on the bottom 10% needed the program more than we needed them maybe. So I think the approach isn't a whole lot different as far as just, building trust. So I think trust is such a big thing. And we work through a trust framework. I'll just give it to you real quick. But the first variable in that trust framework is care, because people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the fastest way to show somebody you care is to truly listen. So becoming systematic in how you care and spending time with people. The second variable is credibility, because you need to be credible. You need to know your stuff. Like, you can't just care and not know your stuff. You have to be credible. Otherwise, people aren't going to trust you. And the third one is reliability. And we would talk, that ultimately it's the person over the player. And one thing that I would always check myself on is, am I treating the kid that just got injured and is maybe out for the season the same way I treated them when they were contributing on the field, right? Are you showing up for people when they need you the most? So care, credibility, reliability on the top. And then there's the common denominator, which is authentic vulnerability, and not emotional dumping and pity party, but authentic vulnerability when you are truly trying to connect with people by peeling back the onion, showing some of your dents and scars, and showing that you are human. Because I think we've all had individuals that are leading us that maybe show they care or that they're credible or reliable when they're getting something from it, or, you can just kind of see through people who are fake. So being your true authentic self is the common denominator. So I think looking back at that is building trust is so important in coaching coaches. And then it's about having that culture of having a white belt mindset. Like, we want coaches that have white belt mindsets and black belt skill sets. So it's about that hiring process on the front end too. Who are you bringing into your program? Because that is really, really important on a lot of different levels.
Well, let's take that one step further. So you have a lot of kids who come into the program, young adults, as a freshman. And even if they're on the freshman team, they're still in this ecosystem that you're creating. And it could be very easy for a young adult who's 15, 16 to like, oh yeah, I've heard Steve's message before. Like, this is old news. But you've had a way over the years of having these slogans and these core values. The one I hear a lot is water it. How do you come up with a new phrase every year or a new message every year to keep these students on their toes, keep them engaged, keep them interested?
Yeah, because I do think that's really important, Chris, is I don't care if it's kids or adults, you need to make sure that you are peppering with fresh information, fresh stories, fresh slogans. If you just keep saying the same thing and you don't put twists and turns on things, people stop listening. So I think great leaders have the ability to see around corners. And that's one thing that I would always try to do in the offseason and reflect and say, okay, what are some potential hangups? What does this particular team need? Because you talk about a high turnover rate. We have a high turnover rate in football, in high school football, right? Usually we had 30 to 35 kids that would graduate, and we'd have about 60 sophomores enter our varsity program. And that's a big turnover rate. So knowing that particular group and being able to see around corners, and then also leaning on the leaders within the team and asking for feedback. So we would have, every Sunday I'd have our leadership council in, and I would just listen. Like, my job was sit on my hands, zip my lip, and just listen. And sometimes there was awkward moments of silence, but I wanted them to talk so I could learn about the group and then tailor the message and the story and the principle to what they need in the moment. Right. And one reason why Water the Bamboo, or Water It, is, I think, so effective is it provides hope in the process. So can I share the story real quick?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So there's a type of bamboo farmer that plants the giant bamboo seed out in the field. So he buries it underneath the soil, and morning and night, he waters that soil, waters that seed underneath the soil. 30 days pass, 60 days pass, 90 days pass, a whole year passes, and nothing happens. He doesn't see anything. Second year, same thing. Another 365 days, still nothing. Third year, now people are coming up to him and saying, "What are you doing? There's nothing there. Move on, go do something else." But the bamboo farmer is patient and he's persistent. He continues to water the bamboo. So another 365 days pass, 3 whole years, still nothing. In the fourth year, the giant bamboo will explode through the soil and grow 90 feet in 60 days. So the bamboo was growing. It was just growing underneath the soil. It was forming such a deep and dense root system that it could absorb that type of explosive growth. But as you guys know, we live in a very instant gratification society, right? And we want to see things right away. Unfortunately, results are not microwavable, not all of them, and certainly relationships are not. So we talk about the Water the Bamboo a lot in our program, and we'll have seniors that will go down and talk to the freshmen and give specific examples of players that continued to water the bamboo, never gave up, came in as a freshman at 123 pounds, graduated at 225, was all state, right? Because they continued to water the bamboo, right? So how do we put a twist on that? Well, now we talk about aggressive patience. It's basically the same thing, but aggressive patience is, can you be aggressive in the process, but be patient in the results? Can you hustle day to day without seeing the benefits immediately? So it's the same concept, right? You just find different ways to express that same concept.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, so when you think about that process, right? So that aggressive patience, right? From a behavior perspective, or maybe it's even a mindset perspective, how do you get somebody that is struggling with that, right? Maybe they're inconsistent. What are ways you've seen that you've been able to get through to people? Because to your point, we talk about kind of being unrelenting, right? Like, those that are successful, they don't just do it for a little bit, they do it for a really long time. And, there's so many people that we see give up when they're so darn close, because, one of the examples I give is, you're looking at a sprinter, right? A sprinter at the very last moment, stretches to break through that tape. Well, in life, you don't know where the finish line is, right? For whatever one of your goals, you don't know how close you really are. And so we see so many that they're giving up, and as a leader, you're looking at them saying, "Man, you're right there though." So how have you found, is there a story of someone maybe that was on that cusp, that was maybe on the brink of giving up, that you've been able to kind of break through?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, to be honest with you, is consistent messaging, stories, examples, encouragement throughout, right? So there isn't like, if you just tell this one story, they're going to keep going, right? But it's very similar to coaching with aggressive patience, right? It's continuing to have hustle as a coach and a leader with those people that maybe are struggling, or maybe debating on whether giving up because they have now plateaued and they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, but they're not seeing the immediate results, right? So how do we do that? And I'm not trying to duck your question, so I'll give you a specific thing. Again, I was just out watching state football, and we were talking about this. Right now, we're calling it the building season, right? And it's the stuff that they're waking up at 6 a.m., in the dark, training. It's cold outside. They're running, like they're doing this stuff, and they are going to hit some plateaus. So we encourage them. I talk to them about hunting the good stuff, right? Finding the positives. So there was a quick activity I did with them. The room is full of red stuff at Washington State University. So I said, okay, you got 10 seconds. Count up how many red things you can see. Go. And they started counting, right? And I had them stop. And I said, okay, how many do you see? 20, 40, 50, 60. And I said, how many blue things did you see? Well, none. Well, why? Because you weren't looking for them, right? And I think a lot of times, going back to your thing about mindset, a lot of times when we're in that journey, we're only focusing on the reds. Like we're only focusing on, I'm working so hard, I'm not seeing the benefits. This is so hard. I'm sacrificing this and this and this. You're focusing on all the negatives, but what you don't sometimes stop to see is all the positives. Because although it may feel like a plateau, I guarantee there are some windows of positivity and growth that you need to find, right? So what this kind of looks like to me, I don't know about you guys, but like if I ever buy a new car or looking to buy a new car, and then you go on the highway and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, where before you never saw it. Well, why? Because we started to understand, okay, well, that's in our brain. We're going to start looking for it. And now it was everywhere. It's the same thing with the good stuff. It's the same thing with your organization at McClone. It'd be really easy for your employees, Dustin, to walk in every day and find all the reds, right? Because they're everywhere. And as I told Washington State University, you know what? Blaming and complaining is the easiest thing to do. It takes zero talent, zero skill. Be different, right? Find the good.
Amen.
Hunt the good stuff, because that will give you motivation to continue to water the bamboo, practice aggressive patience.
Steve, and this may be a repeat question because you've just given us so much gold so far. But I'm curious, now you're in a world where you're coaching a lot of leaders, a lot of adults over students. What is one common thread, or maybe a couple common threads, that you're seeing where you're like, if this leader would be more X, or if we could get you to here, that's where you're going to reach your pinnacle? What are you finding in those trends?
Yeah, there's a lot, to be honest with you. And when I made this journey, right, and in my head, the little person voice, my inner critic is like, wow, that stuff worked in high school, but I don't know if it's going to work with, the likes of whoever, the Green Bay Packers or Verizon or whoever we've had the opportunity to work with, but it does. This stuff transfers regardless, because I think leadership is leadership. Culture is culture. Mindset's mindset. And I would say that the biggest thing is centered around, our book, The Twin Thieves, the fear of failure and the fear of judgment, right? And whether you are 14 or you're 40, you need to continue every day to make the choice to rise above the twin thieves, the fear of failure and fear of judgment. And if anybody says I don't have either of them, one, they're lying, or two, they're a psychopath. Like they don't have any emotion, right? Because I think everybody is dealing with it more so than ever in our society because of social media, right? So right now, what are people thinking about me listening to this, right? What am I doing a good enough job? Are they going to post something weird after I'm done, right? Are they going to make fun of me? Those are all things that go through your head as a healthy human being. Do you have the ability to, A, recognize it, 2, question your thoughts, and 3, rise above them? And I think that, to me, whether, again, you're a high schooler or you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or you're a sports team, or you're a Division I college football team, I think right now in our society, everybody is trying to figure out how to navigate those two things to become the best version of themselves.
For sure. It's interesting. We talked in the past even about imposter syndrome, and that the same thing, right? That fear of judgment. And, it's really how you use it. Having a little bit of that isn't the end of the world, right? I mean, everybody has it, and it can fuel you in a lot of ways. But if it creates inaction, that's really where the problem is. And I think that's what you did so well in your book, is it's everybody's dealing with it. So just accept it, rise above it, understand how you can rise above it, and then you go after your goals, because it can be fuel to make you better at your craft for sure. But don't make it create inaction.
Correct. Yeah, I think fear can be a great thing short term. But if you're dealing with that fear and you're using that fear as motivation day in and day out, eventually you're going to wear down. Eventually, it's not going to continue to have that same motivation. So I don't disagree with you. I think it does motivate people in a certain capacity. But if that's your only motivation, I don't think in the long term it's going to be beneficial for anybody.
Sure.
Steve, you coached for about a decade, and at some point you must have had organizations like colleges call and say, hey, we want you to coach at the collegiate level. At what point did you know there was an opportunity to do something different or something greater, get into publishing, get into coaching like you are now?
Yeah, I had some opportunities at the college level to be assistant, be a head coach. Some people reached out. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up basically without a father. So one of my goals in life is to be a good dad. And I didn't know if I could. I'm sure there's a lot of outstanding coaches and dads out there that can be on the road recruiting and doing all those things and putting all those hours in and still be a great dad. I don't think I could. So that was a big reason why I didn't go that direction. And then why I chose to, do this full time now is a lot of different reasons. But one was an interesting conversation with a guy named Bob Chapman. Bob Chapman is a really successful CEO. Barry Waymiller, he's an unbelievable author. Everybody Matters. He wrote a book. So he and I have become friends. And a few years back, he asked me a really interesting question. He said, you know what, you're doing a lot of really great things in your classroom, at your high school, and even in your community. But what are you doing for this world? And that one, like great leaders do, he planted a seed. That seed kind of rattled in my brain for a couple of years. And I'm like, is there something more that I could possibly do? And I'm not saying that teaching is not changing the world. I think I changed a lot of people's worlds. Hopefully that doesn't come across as arrogant, but I think I made an impact on some kids. But I wanted to see, is there more that I could possibly do? And that's kind of why I went this direction.
That's excellent.
Very cool. Well, I've got one last question before we put a bow on the conversation. I'd love to know really what it's like working with professional sports organizations and some of the Fortune 500 companies in the world.
Not real different. I'll be honest with you. So one of my first opportunities after I left teaching, so June, second week of June, I had the opportunity to work with Green Bay Packers. So Matt LaFleur reached out. I went down to Kohler. They had their leadership retreat, so their entire coaching staff, Brian Gutekunst, the recruiting and scouting, and then Mark Murphy and his entire leadership team. And man, was I nervous, to say the least, right? But what I found is that organization's unbelievable because they have unbelievable, incredible people that care. And I'll be honest with you, that have a white belt mindset. I mean, they're in there taking notes, and I'm like, okay, like this is impressive, right? They could have easily sat back and say, well, whether it's the Green Bay Packers and Matt LaFleur, who are unbelievable people that have a growth mindset. So Doc, for the manager of the LA Dodgers, Lucas Jade, my business partner, has been working with him for one-on-one for a number of years now. And again, same type of idea, growth mindset, great human being that cares about people. And whether it's, top of the field there or top of the field as far as Fortune 500 companies, I would say the common thread is it comes down to the people, right? And how they treat one another, what they value. And there isn't a whole lot of difference, to be honest with you. A lot less than I thought there was going to be.
Very cool. Steve, where can people find you if they want to connect with you or learn more about what you have to offer?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and then, we have a landing page, jadenjones.com. There's a little dash in between, Jaden, Jadin, Jones.com. A lot of different avenues to reach out, and I would love to connect with anybody who's interested.
And don't forget to plug your book.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's so Twin Thieves on Amazon. And if you're not familiar, it's a short read. Our goal was that people actually pick it up and finish it. It's amazing the stat at something like 80 to 90% of people don't finish books. So it's short. It is, I believe, easy to read, and we tried to make it as meaty as possible. So it's a parable, and there's stories within the story that I believe that I can relate with just about anybody.
Yeah. And it is a great book. From my understanding, they're all based on true stories. So check it out, everybody. Steve, one last thing before we wrap it up would be, what's one thing that you want to leave people thinking about when they think about leadership and what you do?
That's a great question. I think I would say that in essence, it's a three-legged stool. And the three legs are leadership development, cultural growth, and developing an elite mindset. And you got to have all three legs. Otherwise, you're not going to reach your full potential as a leader or as an organization, because leadership development and cultural growth are really easy when things are going well, but you need the mindset skills as well to lean into when adversity strikes. So I think you need to continue to develop in those three areas for you to reach your full potential as a leader and as an organization.
Powerful stuff. I like it. Dustin, any final thoughts?
No, thanks for joining us, Steve. This was excellent. It was great stories, great insight, a lot of great nuggets for the listeners here today. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thanks so
you having
much,
me, guys. It was a fun conversation.
Likewise. And we're going to ask you eventually to come back. So the conversation was great. I've got more questions I'd love to ask down the road. But in the meantime, we thank everybody for their ear today, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.